Lord Vaizey, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. And I propose that we discuss today the issues related to the rapid evolution of digital economy and digital society. And my first question is related to this speed, to this rapidness. So we basically, digital society is being regulated by various blocks. We have privacy law, competition law, criminal law, data protection, copyright, etc., etc. And we all are very busy in our own niche. Particularly in competition law, until recently at least, we were focused exclusively or mainly on economic efficiency and the objective criteria, and any impact from the broader societal or governmental agenda has been treated as something not very welcome, so to say. Now the situation changed. We understand that we're part of this broader process, but still, because it's so busy, we somehow, and we are not prepared for it, to be honest. It's really difficult to see the broader, consistent, harmonious plan of the UK in the area of digital.
Well, thanks, Ellis. That's a very big question, and I'll try and answer it as clearly as I can. I think the first point to make is the structure of government in the UK and indeed in other countries is not conducive to joined up thinking. You know, we have Whitehall departments that all sit in their different silos. So you have the DCMS, Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, which is now responsible for digital policy, but that sort of happened almost by osmosis. There have been some strategic changes to make it more coordinated. Just as I was leaving government in 2016, we had managed to secure responsibility for data, which had previously sat in another department, the Cabinet Office. And we consciously made a move to transfer data policy over to DCMS because it was the digital department and it made sense to join it up. And in essence, you then had one department looking over the Information Commissioner and Ofcom. So that was a good example of joined up thinking. But when you think about the digital landscape, you've obviously got the Treasury interested in terms of tax incentives. You've got the Education Department interested in terms of skills. You've got the Business Department interested in terms of competition and strategic intervention and support and research. So you've already got 3 or 4 departments at play, leaving aside the Department for International Trade, which obviously has a big role to play in supporting the digital industries. And of course, when we talk about digital, we now are talking really about the whole economy. So you might as well refer to supermarkets as digital companies. So it's a very complicated narrative because in essence, digital covers everything. And just to give you a few of the kind of ludicrous examples I came across when I was in government, I discovered completely by accident, because the transport minister happened to be visiting my constituency, that Network Rail, the company that runs our railways in the UK, was building 12,000 miles of fibre broadband to run its digital signalling system. And this was basically a huge backbone of fibre. No one had thought, well, is there a way of coordinating with the mobile phone companies and the telephone companies about using this fibre for backhaul and therefore potentially saving a hell of a lot of money? And of course, that never happened. So that's an example of why joined up government is important. The second point, sort of narrowing it down a bit to competition, and I'm taking your question as an invitation to critique competition policy. We're talking just at the time when the Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund has bought 2 eSports companies. They are called Faceit and ESL. Now, why would I cite that as an example of competition policy? It's interesting because it's a sovereign wealth fund that's clearly made a political strategic decision to invest in an emerging digital area that's presumably going to continue to grow and boom as it has done over the last couple of years. And it's a conscious decision, I presume, by the Saudi Arabian government as part of its sort of cultural strategy to be a player in this way. Now, we don't have a sovereign wealth fund in the UK, so it's perhaps not a good analogy. But I've been struck by how narrowly focused our competition authorities are in the UK. So to take a very old example, which has become a sort of legendary example, there was a project called Project Kangaroo in the late noughties, in about 2008, 2009. And this was the project of the broadcasters, the public service broadcasters in the UK, the BBC, ITV and Channel 4, to put together a digital platform. And the idea was fairly obvious, which is that working together and building a digital platform together, British content could then punch above its weight. The whole would be greater than the sum of the parts. And the competition authorities vetoed it, and they vetoed it on perfectly legitimate competition grounds, which would have given these public service broadcasters effective dominance of British digital platform content. But of course, they didn't take into account the emergence of what we are now all too familiar with, the platforms such as Netflix and Disney Plus that have this global reach. And very late in the day, we now have BritBox, which can't really compete with these platforms. So that is an example of, I think, the competition authorities taking a very narrow view. And for me, the examples are legion, whether it's local newspaper mergers, where again, the competition authority will look at a very narrow geographical area and say, well, you're going to be dominant in local newspapers, without thinking about the enormous pressures that local newspapers are under from digital advertising on Google, which is a sort of tangential point, but it fundamentally upended their business model. And also, I think the most notorious case I managed to get on the front page of the Financial Times because I criticized Ofcom for this decision was not to allow the merger of O2 and 3, two mobile phone companies in the UK. The margins for mobile phone companies in the UK are very, very small. There are 4 operators, but Ofcom had got it into its head that to benefit the consumer, 4 operators were essential. Now, those companies have since won a case in the European Commission, but far too late. It doesn't change the circumstances. But again, the competition authority, I think, was looking at this through the prism of benefits to the consumer, when in fact, the British consumer gets an amazing deal from mobile phone companies, which is why their margins are so low, and it failed to see the bigger picture. So I see time and again the competition authority failing to take a strategic look. And I think if I was to sum it up, it would be that they don't look laterally. They don't think in a digital landscape. You now, UK players face global competitors who can enter the UK market pretty much frictionlessly. There aren't very many barriers to entry. And they fail also to what they would say would be comparing apples with oranges, but they fail to see that a search engine like Google is actually now a competitor to a newspaper. So if they get a newspaper merger in front of them, they'll say, oh, let's look at the newspaper market, instead of saying, let's look at the digital advertising market, which is completely dominated by Google and Facebook. So I think those are problematic. Having said all that, I think the competition authority is getting better in some cases at intervening, and certainly intervening as far as some of the bigger tech companies are concerned.
And this leads us perfectly to the issue of kind of new period or new even era of digital competition policy, where UK is considered as one of the UK competition authority, alongside with other sectoral authorities, are considered as one of the pioneers and kind of agenda setters in the global perspective. You basically mentioned online platforms and digital advertising market study, this remarkable initiative, which or remarkable research, which has been conducted by the CMA quite recently, and which has many implications, which basically demonstrated to the entire world how important digital advertising is from economic perspective, but broader as well. But also we have this governmental proposal for new competition, new pro-competitive regime for digital markets, which envisages by the very title pro-competitive that it will be more proactive essentially, rather than just responsive to allegedly anti-competitive conduct. It bestows to the competition authority this broader mission, supposedly. We don't know yet which formula will end up in the parliament. Can you elaborate, can you offer your view about how you would ideally or realistically see this new, more engaged, more not political in this, negative sense, but more strategic, let's say, status of the competition authority?
Yeah, I think there is a sea change going on. Whether how it will work out in practice and what impact it will have obviously remains to be seen. So the Digital Markets Unit actually came from a recommendation from a committee that I sit on called the Digital Committee in the House of Lords, which said that the Competition Authority needed a specialized unit that would look at digital markets in a much more sophisticated way than purely in terms of economic competition. And we know as well, if you look at the FTC and the appointment of Lena Khan, that there is now a move afoot among more competition regulators to take a new view of how you regulate effectively big tech or digital in its broadest sense. And the important change here, as you will know only too well, as will your viewers, is to move away from simply seeing it through the narrow prism of economic harm to the consumer, because you and I use these services pretty much for free. We're on Zoom. I've never paid for a Zoom call yet, even the ones that I set up. We use Facebook for free. We use Google Search for free. We're giving up our data, of course, but it doesn't cost us any money. And if you simply look at it through that prism, then you allow effectively these players to completely dominate. And as we've seen, Facebook and Google now completely dominate the advertising market. So in that sense, they're anti-competitive and costing businesses money because they don't have any competition, even if they're not costing consumers a great deal of money. So the Digital Markets Unit will hopefully have a much more sophisticated outlook on what constitutes potentially anti-competitive behavior or an anti-competitive acquisition. And we've already seen the Competition and Markets Authority is looking at, I think it's Facebook's purchase of Giphy. And that is a good example where in the old regime, you could say, what possible harm is this to the consumer? It's actually an add-on benefit. When you send WhatsApps with funny GIFs to your friends, that's a great little new service to have on WhatsApp. But understandably now they will be saying, well, what does this actually do in terms of market dominance for Facebook in terms of potential competitors who might try and take on this marketplace? So I think that is a very positive development. We've still got to see legislation. At the moment, politics in Britain is such that actually the digital department, DCMS, has a slew of legislation, some of which we'll talk about in the course of our conversation. So how quickly the Digital Markets Unit, which actually technically it'd be the business department that makes the change, can get up and running, we will wait to see. But I think it does represent a shift in the regulatory approach, which has been caused by the rise of big tech and will now be potentially the way of checking the dominance of the big platforms.
Let me stay on this for a minute and probably ask you a difficult question, which is both difficult technically, but and also has some negative pedigree or connotation. When we talk about recalibrating the competition in digital markets, looking in particular at big tech industry, we somehow on one hand we understand that this network effect, that it's really hard to avoid the situation that where you will have a winner in each specific segment. There is no room for more than two strong market players because they offer so many efficiencies again for users, end users, business users, customers. And that's the very structure of digital economy, where a winner takes all or winner takes most. So do you think that there is kind of an idea or the appetite to change the players in the industry, or it's rather to bring them more accountable, to make them more responsible in terms of kind of regulating them quasi public utilities, so that they shouldn't change their algorithms and rankings voluntarily, arbitrarily? So which of those two you think dominates the legislation process?
I think it's a really good question, and I think that the answer is probably the second part, which is to regulate them a bit like public utilities. So you're quite right that the dominance that arises from a Facebook or a Google is through network effects, that you effectively because all your friends are on Facebook, you're going to stay on Facebook, although arguably Twitter might be a kind of social competitor, but clearly Instagram was also a competitor. In fact, I don't use Facebook, I use Instagram, and that's how I keep in touch with my friends. I see their pictures, you know, I follow people from meeting them at a drinks party right through to seeing them get married, seeing them have children, seeing them move into their new house. It's kind of an amazing social phenomenon. There's one person I follow who I've literally met once, and I know everything about her life, having met her sort of 8 years ago and befriended her on Instagram. But of course, I'm leading up to the point that Facebook then bought Instagram. So I'm still, even though I proudly don't use Facebook, stuck in the Facebook universe. And a lot of this is partly driven by sentiment. I mean, we don't sit here and moan about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn, generally speaking, is not a particularly toxic environment. It's an incredibly useful environment. And I find it very useful. Almost anyone I meet in a professional context, I will find them on LinkedIn, and that is an extremely useful tool. And I don't particularly want, even as a consumer, to have 2 or 3 professional network platforms that I potentially have to go to find someone that I've just met. So in some ways, a quasi-monopoly can be good for the consumer, just simply for the convenience of how we live their lives, which leads me on to back to my short answer to your question, which is I therefore think that we're more likely to get them regulated as public utilities. I get my water from Thames Water. I'm not going to get it from anyone else. The pipes go into my house. I live in London. And therefore Thames Water can fleece me should they choose to do so. But they don't, because they're regulated, they're price regulated, they're regulated so they make a certain level of investment in the infrastructure so that I will always get clean water, and they're regulated so that I will always pay a reasonable price for the water that I get. And public utility regulation of Facebook and co includes the issues we're going to talk about in a minute: online safety bill, data protection that you've already mentioned, privacy laws, IP laws, and so on. But I do think, to a certain extent, you know, the case I referred to earlier, Facebook and Giphy, you will see more obstacles put in the way of the platforms to prevent them beginning to encroach and gain market dominance in adjacent areas. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the regulators, particularly in the US, deal with Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, for example, and whether they decide that Microsoft getting into games could lead to dominance. I personally don't think it will, because of, you know, there's enough competition through Sony and also through mobile games, but we'll see. So I think there will be far more greater vigilance of either the acquisition of startups, which effectively prevents a new marketplace forming, or the movement into adjacent but closely related areas.
And now in this context, we obviously understand that those leaders in the industry, they have this remarkable ability to comply with the letter of law without necessarily, you know, without necessarily going further than this. We can see it with taxation policy. We can see it with many other sectoral policies which struggle with often from the lack of this kind of broader common denominators. This, you know, some steering from maybe from government or some you know, broader kind of synchronous agenda. And one of this, supposedly, some people say that it would be too interventionist, perhaps, but we see at least this trend materializing in digital regulation cooperation forum, where 4 sectoral digital, not only digital, enforcers have agreed to cooperate in various ways and on various issues, trying essentially to synchronize their agenda to avoid the situations which you have mentioned earlier, which is kind of a textbook example of what we never replicate ports, or we never replicate railway stations. And you have just mentioned that we have such examples in real life. So how do you see this role of the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum?
Well, I'm thrilled to see the establishment of the Digital Regulatory Cooperation Forum. It's exactly the kind of thing I wanted to see as a minister. You know, it's again, a lot of what I say might sound deeply prosaic and uninspiring, but actually they're really important truths that we often forget. It's amazing how little, how often people don't meet in the same room when they're involved in very similar areas. So I've already talked about how difficult government is because too many government departments work in their own silos. I remember when I wanted to extend mobile phone coverage by subsidising the building of masts in very rural areas. When I got all the operators in a room together, they said this is the first time we sort of sat down together and tried to work together on a common project. So it's kind of amazing how often people don't sit in the same room when they've got very similar interests. So I would have, if I'd had a longer time as minister, probably ended up with the Digital Regulatory Cooperative Forum. I'll give you an example before that. I got the Information Commissioner's Office and Ofcom to work together on nuisance calls, what the Americans call robocalls. I suddenly discovered that both of them had sort of potential jurisdiction in this area. And as a minister, I had to bring them into the same room to make sure that we could do a work plan that worked together. So this is long overdue, the Digital Regulatory Cooperation Forum. And in many ways, it is, touch wood, the best of both worlds, because I don't believe in a super regulator. I don't think you should merge Ofcom with the Information Commissioner's Office. And clearly, the other two that are involved, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Competition Authority, have much, much wider and different remits than Ofcom and the ICO. But it's quite clear that they need to work together on overlapping areas. And as I said at the very beginning of this conversation, everything is now digital. So the CMA, as you've already mentioned, has done this groundbreaking work on digital advertising. It's therefore vital that, given that Ofcom is effectively going to be the regulator of platforms, that it works with the Competition and Markets Authority on this. The Financial Conduct Authority obviously has to oversee online scams and all the kind of financial fraud that is now taking place online. So it's essential, again, that it has a link to Ofcom and the other regulators. So that's the main point. And it's interesting, we've had a debate in Parliament. My committee has issued a report, which we may drill down into during this conversation. And one of the important things they made clear was, the Digital Regulatory Cooperative Forum, it's a bit of a mouthful, has a chief executive now, has a standalone chief executive, and will have its own budget, as it were. And our concern in the report was to say, first of all, it needs to be very transparent, its kind of terms of reference, because as you and I both know, the minute you set up any organization, there is a natural human psychology that one organization will want to gain power and another one will want to hold on to power. So we need to make sure that the Cooperation Forum doesn't, end up in some kind of power tussle. And also it needs to be accountable. It meets behind closed doors at the moment for practical reasons, but we need to know what it's discussing and what issues it's discussing, and also its ability to engage with other regulators on an ad hoc basis. So all of that needs to be kind of transparent and in the open. The other point that people miss about the DRCF is that in a world where you're trying to regulate big tech, you're also competing against big tech for talent. So if you want to hire a fantastic data analyst for your company who really understands, or for your regulator who really understands how these platforms use data and has a thoughtful insight into how you can regulate that, you will pay them probably a significant six-figure salary to tempt them away from the platforms. And one of the benefits, again, of this cooperation forum, although it's not actually the cooperation forum that will do this, but the closer working of these regulators is, for example, Ofcom could hire someone who works across Ofcom and the ICO and the CMA and is paid by all three, and therefore they can afford to hire that person. So it's a very, very important step forward, and it deserves strong support from politicians, albeit politicians do also need to hold it accountable.
Okay, let me then ask you a small question about this revolving door situation, which works both ways. Yeah, it often allows such institutions as Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, for example, to hire the best experts from the industry, but we also have the opposite, move as well, and some people see it as a kind of problematic situation. So where people who, with all this knowledge and with strategic kind of vision, so to say, leave the regulatory side and they go to business, and obviously there is nothing we can somehow do about it. It's kind of it's an objective world, and they don't break any rules. But I wanted to ask you more about the rules. Has it been thematized or problematized that we need to have some benchmarks which they are not allowed to pass, or to somehow to miss when they go with all this knowledge to the industry or consultancy, without kind of pathologizing the situation, but maybe bringing some order, or it's not something which is seen as a systemic problem?
I'm not that worried about it. I mean, I've got several things to say in reply. First of all, I'm constantly amazed at the quality of the officials that we have working in government. You know, if you go somewhere like GCHQ, there are people working there who probably could command even 10 times their salary. And I'm amazed at how lucky we are to have them working for us, paid far less than they would get in the private sector. Some of that is to do with lifestyle. Some of it's to do with the quality and interest of the work. You know, if you're working in GCHQ on issues of national security, I suspect it's probably more interesting than working with Facebook on taking down offensive content. So some of it's because of their own personal motivation and ambition. I also think, while I've always been in favor of regulating big tech, I don't think we should demonize it. So, for example, if, for the sake of argument, somebody from Ofcom goes to work for Facebook, in some ways that can be a good thing, because you'll then have someone who understands how government works, understand what government wants to get in terms of policy outcomes, and might therefore actually make Facebook a better partner of government and a more cooperative partner with government in trying to achieve important policy outcomes. I think that a lot of what Facebook has done wrong has been through the sin of omission, as in being too focused on profit and not thinking about the wider societal impact, rather than a kind of evil intent to cause all these problems. So that kind of switch between government and the private sector and back again can, I think, be beneficial. There are obviously rules in place, particularly obviously with officials who've handled sensitive information, to prevent them potentially working in the private sector for a period of time. But clearly you can't stop people earning a living. I mean, when I stopped being a minister, I had to get approval for a period of 2 years for any private sector role that I took on. Most of that was rubber stamped, presumably because the government realized I didn't know what I was talking about. So I wasn't about to give up any secret information. But so there are rules in place. But as I say, I think one can take a more benign view of what people, in a somewhat pejorative way, call the revolving door.
My next question is related to the industry which you have mentioned already, eSport, and you also mentioned online gaming. So these are they are part of this kind of one of the fastest developing and evolving markets, which generate enormous attention from users, and a significant portion of those users are really not even teenagers, they are really children. It obviously connects to in some sense to online safety bill, which you have mentioned already. But my question is more kind of market oriented. Do we somehow understand the mechanics of how they generate? It sounds like for people grown up remembering black and white TV, so to say, that these industries are so esoteric and so not serious, so to say. But not only they generate billions of pounds, but and also they are the most dynamics in terms of offering advertising to the advertisers, the audience, which is the most active and will soon become the trendsetter. Do you see this misunderstanding or lack of understanding or lack of focus on these industries, or you think the situation evolves from the regulatory side, or the situation evolves in the right way and we somehow understand the main patterns of its evolution?
No, I don't think anyone does. I don't think even these companies necessarily understand how these things are going to evolve. Already, my children who are teenagers, use TikTok a lot, which I don't understand, and Snap a lot. And I'm sort of relaxed about it. Parents throw their hands up in the air and say, my God, my kid is stuck on a screen for hours every day. But, I was watching television for hours every day when I was a kid. I'm young enough that it wasn't black and white, it was color. So I think one just has to be, to a certain extent, relaxed about how human society develops with technology. And also, it's extremely difficult to predict where all this will go. And if you could predict it, we wouldn't be sitting here, we'd be off in a startup. So let's see how it emerges. Now, as far as government regulation concerns, I would say two things. One is, I think we've taken a very, very long time to get where we are. We're still at least 2 years away from seeing the online safety bill come into being. And I remember 10 years ago talking in Parliament about children accessing adult content. And I found it absolutely bizarre that if you went into a newsagent, the adult magazine would be on the top shelf. There would be somebody behind the counter who could check if you were old enough, whereas you could access quite extreme pornography without any barrier at all online. So why we haven't introduced age verification in the last 10 years, I find bizarre. But the other thing I would say about internet regulation is that you mustn't let the best be the enemy of the good. As you will know, and we've been discussing from a lot of this conversation, how the Competition and Markets Authority is going to evolve and change direction. No regulatory regime that you put in place is ever perfect by any stretch. And when it meets the real world, lots of holes and anomalies can be found in that regulation. But we need something. We need some legislation. We need, as Ofcom have said to me, and when I've talked to them about this legislation, they need a tool with which they can start to regulate the platforms. Without any legislation, without any regulatory backstop, you can moan about Facebook till you're blue in the face. It's only when you're able to take regulatory action with the possibility of financial penalties that you will begin to modify their behavior. And you might find that the regulation isn't good enough for some of the problems you want to deal with. So you come back and you refine the regulation. But that's a start. It forces them to the table. And it gives you an ultimate backstop if they won't cooperate in the way that society, I think, needs them to cooperate.
You mentioned that some jurisdictions are very proactive in trying to invest in the industries which are considered to be, of the important infrastructural nature in the future. They will channel data, channel advertising revenues and information about and shape human conduct as well in a sense, because it's reciprocal. We also have now initiatives to limit or to scrutinize to large extent investment, foreign subsidies and the investments which come to this jurisdiction, and as well as products and services which are being distributed in the UK. In terms of how fair they have generated their power, so to say. Do you think this way or this approach should be boosted as well?
I mean, I think again, the UK didn't really have a foreign investment regime, which the US has had for a very long time. CFIUS, the Committee for Foreign Investment in the US, is very well known and has been used, I have to say, by the US administration, particularly under Donald Trump, as a I was going to say sort of diplomatic tool. It's a pretty blunt instrument to kind of roll back Chinese investment in the US economy in a sort of, in some ways understandable tit for tat way, because Western companies investing in China find it very difficult. But I think this legislation is, I supported it, I critiqued it and put down some amendments, but broadly speaking, I have no problem with it. I think it's perfectly legitimate to look at where investment is coming from into key strategic industries in your economy. I mean, the British have traditionally had an extremely laissez-faire approach, which again, I'm kind of relaxed about. But most of our media is now owned by the US, and the US would never allow that to happen you know, for their major broadcasters to be owned by a foreign country, even by Britain. But we take the view in the UK that, you know, capital is to a certain extent neutral, and getting investment from abroad, which creates British jobs and investment in British infrastructure, is a good thing. But nevertheless, again, in a sort of backstop way, I think it's important now that the government has these powers, particularly given the current relationship with China and also issues to do with Russia and indeed other regimes, to take a view, is this strategically unwelcome investment from a potential hostile power into a critical part of our infrastructure. So I have no problem with that. It does provide obviously some business uncertainty. It makes yet again the business of mergers and acquisitions, it adds an additional layer of friction which will benefit the lawyers, and we've got very good lawyers in this country and a thriving legal economy. So in that sense, it may also benefit UK PLC.
In this context, let me ask you a question which puzzles me for quite a long time. And for me, it's a dilemma. It's irresolvable. But still, we see how we see the power of facial recognition technology. It's enormous power. It's enormous, the speed with which it evolves. It's enormous kind of synergy effect on other industries, which helps to, you know, to build many you know, other competences in the digital in the digital marketing, etc. But we also understand that it has potential and real danger in terms of protecting people's privacy, in terms of avoiding the situation where we will all be somehow structured and you know, systematized in social ranking and social profiles, etc. And thus we see, for example, in such jurisdictions as the European Union, not very hostile, but very cautious approach to facial recognition technology. So my question is, and well justified, so to say, that it's a compromise with privacy, with human dignity, which we are not ready yet to accept. And this is one example only. My question is, acknowledging that we can be more considered and reserved about these issues for right reasons, shouldn't we also bear in mind that this technology will continue evolving in other jurisdictions who have less ethical concerns, and who will then become trendsetters, and then they somehow export these industries and other adjacent industry technologies to our country, and thus we will become, rather than being trendsetter, we will become a consumer recipient of these technologies with all this spillover effect. Is it kind of a problem, or something which has been too problematized too much?
So I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, first of all, there's the very, very big question, which is how technology will be used in different jurisdictions. And just as you know, we live in a very open and liberal society, and I don't think those of us who live in Britain realize quite how lucky we are, or indeed kind of what a kind of minority we're in. We live in a country where we kind of assume most of the rest of the world is like us, and that is not true. Most of the rest of the world is not like us. And even those countries that are like us, there are quite a few that could easily flip to the other side. Now, if you see the prevalence of how technology is used, with facial recognition technology here in the UK, you would argue that a well-regulated facial recognition sector would be of benefit, not just in terms of just consumer ease. You know, I walk up to the business lounge at the airport and it recognizes my face and I gain entrance, but also for criminal proceedings, the police can scan a crowd and see their most wanted suspect walking down Oxford Street and arrest them. But we've had obviously big debates about facial recognition in the UK and how it's been used, because some police forces have been trialing it. Nevertheless, people quite rightly point out that we have more CCTV cameras in this country per head than any other country, and it hasn't had a huge impact on our liberties, but it has, I think, had a big impact on how we solve crimes. So it's important in an open society that we debate these issues and we have a regulatory regime that ensures that they're used in appropriate ways. But we must also recognize that that same technology in the hands of the wrong people, i.e. an autocratic government, becomes actually a tool of state repression rather than a way to make our lives work more easily. And some of the debates, which sort of flips your question a bit, if we had a thriving facial recognition industry in this country, there would now be a debate, could you export that technology to China? Because you would have an innate understanding of how that technology might be used and not in the way it's used in the UK. I also think that I wouldn't, hang up our liberties in order that we have a thriving facial recognition industry. And I think the important point to make here is that an open society, a liberal society, is messy. We don't have, as I said earlier, a sovereign wealth fund that can make a strategic investment in eSports. But that messiness, I think, is ultimately our key to success. You have a more open society, a more democratic society where you have international academics at universities, much more cross-fertilization from great minds that want to come and live in the UK because it's a great place to work as an academic, it's a great place to set up a business. There's capital available, you can experiment, you can try and fail. And a more state-directed economy, I don't think it ultimately is ever as innovative as a capitalist open economy.
Even if you're talking about hybrid economies, which try to synthesize the best parts of both worlds.
I mean, obviously, we know about the arms race between China and the US on artificial intelligence, and it may be that the Chinese make great breakthroughs and do end up winning. I mean, I take all that with a pinch of salt. Often when you see US agencies saying that China's winning the AI race, they're really making a bid to Congress for funding. So I still think our open economy will win through in terms of innovation and creativity in a way that more state-directed economies will not, even if they're trying to mimic capitalist system.
All right, and this leads me perfectly to the question, which which is probably more open-ended and which is more related to your expertise and your kind of horizon understanding of these processes. You obviously observe the evolution of the markets and what markets want from new entrants, so to say, in terms of labor, in terms of students who are graduating now in very unusual post-pandemic world. Do you think there are some skills or some common mistakes which you observe from those who just start their career, or there is some expertise which is missing in the field? What would be your kind of recommendation, friendly, non-binding suggestion to our students?
Well, that's an very interesting question. I mean, I read an interview with Richard Branson today, which said that education was a complete waste of time, and you're much better leaving school at 16 and starting a business and trying and failing until you succeed. I mean, I think there are core skills that you can take from university, and computer science, mathematics, engineering, and STEM subjects are clearly vital. You can't build a bridge simply by kind of opening a guide to how to build a bridge. So you need those. But I think the important point, which does echo exactly my answer from before, is kind of life skills and creativity are vitally important. I can't remember, I think it might have been Google that did a survey of its employees and found that the success of the company was based on having the right mix of people from humanities and scientific backgrounds. And we've been discussing facial recognition. So again, it's one thing to have the kind of tech person who can make this stuff work, but you do need the creativity, first of all, to create the interface that means that people will want to use the technology, but also consider what the implications are of the technology that you're bringing to bear. So and I think what sets, again, the UK economy apart from many others, and indeed from the Chinese economy, is this kind of streak of creativity and design that is vital. People, we live in a commoditized world where it's easy to build stuff and make stuff. What's much harder is making it stuff that people want to buy and use and so on and so forth. So I think that's very important. And I would say to your students that it may be enough for you to be a mathematics genius graduate when you leave your university, and you may go and work for a hedge fund and make hundreds of millions of pounds every year because you understand algorithms. But I would, for those who are not going to be taking those jobs, do not lose sight of your creative side, and do not lose sight of your soft skills, your ability to work in a team, your ability to make a presentation. You know, I've been on enough webinars where somebody is presenting some very interesting research, but they are so boring that none of us are taking it in. So there's no point in discovering the truth if you can't communicate it.
Indeed. Lord Vaizey, thank you very much for agreeing to share your views with all of us. And at the end, I suggest we have this. I obviously asked questions which are interesting and appealing for myself, but obviously the viewers might find that I have not asked questions which are really important in the context of our conversation. So I propose that we leave this open for a week after we release this video, and you can ask your questions in comments to the YouTube video, and Lord Vaizey will become available to answer them in writing.
I'll be delighted.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alice.